Here's a sneak peek from today's episode.
And so even in search and all of those things, what's still going to resonate is this back and forth exchange of, are you there to sell me or are you there to help me? Are you there to, just get my dollars in the door and then are you going to leave me? Or are you there to really be a trusted partner?
Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Nettie. Nettie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Nettie, I'm excited. We haven't talked about this subject and this analogy and how this really relates to content before, so I'm really excited to dive in. But before we get there, let's get to know you, your background, and your history.
So, my name is Nettie Reynolds, and connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm a playwright, and my background and a content producer. I work for a really amazing educational software company. And my background, I started out as a technology journalist. Then I own my own PR and marketing firm, which help business book authors, get really high on all those book lists. And then I came back to content marketing. It's something I really, really love because it brings in the drama of a play and the staging process and all of those things. So that's really my sweet spot.
Love it. That's amazing. So we're going to talk about this subject, how a 10-minute play is like a content funnel. Okay, so I don't know if I've personally, so I have season tickets to a local theater. I have seen plenty of plays. I don't know if I've ever experienced a 10-minute play. So maybe give us a little background on this 10-minute play concept. And then I have a million questions about how it relates to content, but let's make sure everyone's on the same page. What's a 10-minute play beyond just the obvious time length of 10 minutes?
Yeah, so a 10-minute play is really, I don't know the original history of them, but when I started writing them and submitting them to, they're called out of ink festivals, where you have 10 minutes to write. You have something that you can produce that can be rendered on the stage in 10 minutes or less. They're very vibrant plays. They're short. They're often funny, but they can also be very dramatic. They have specific goals. So you have 10 minutes to, say the beginning, middle, and the end. So you've got a really short, succinct template to work within. And part of why 10-minute plays are so popular is because as the number of people goes back and forth about who attends theater, these plays can actually grow bigger audiences. Because if you have 5 10-minute plays and you might have 4 actors per play, that's 40 people. Those 40 people at least have one person that they can invite to the theater. And so it's a great way of getting people out to the theater. And usually they're done around a theme if they're a part of a, 5 or 7 minute festival. And so again, that thematic balance is something that is really similar to content and the theme of what you're writing on and what you're trying to portray to an audience. And I always think of the audience as, in both spaces, as the heroes of the story. And you want them to follow along and be seen and have something really resonate to them very quickly.
Very cool. I love that. So we've dove into this. So 10-minute play, self-contained, really cool narrative in 10 minutes. And it's like content because it's how the content kind of flows. What's interesting though, in this title, we talk about a content funnel. So how does the 10-minute play concept flow into the entire funnel? How does that work?
Well, it's kind of like what you and I talked about before, where the hook, the play is the top of the funnel. So if you look at, there's a story that I wrote, Detecting Obstacles, which is about a woman talking to a Roomba she believes is her reincarnated husband, Richard. And so that play itself, what you want to do at the top of the funnel is have the audience lean in, just like in content. When you're using blog titles or videos or ads, you're looking at making someone stop their scrolling. And so the hook is that immediate, emotional narrative grip.
Love that. That's very cool. So that's the top of the funnel. That's the hook. That's the entry point. How does the play concept go into the middle and the bottom of the funnel?
So the middle of the funnel is where the stakes rise, where the characters evolve. So in a play, the stakes were rising, for instance, in my play, Detecting Obstacles, where her two adult children are trying to get her to go to a grief group, or to kind of let go of some of her grip on grief and join a group that can help her. And so if you look at that, that's the building the trust stage in the middle of the funnel. So that's where you might produce ebooks or webinars or nurture emails. And it's content that says, we understand you. So in the middle of the play or the middle of the funnel, we're building trust. We're not selling, we're showing empathy for you. And we're really listening as well as guiding you and nurturing you to the next stage of, the play. So if you go to the next stage of the play, it's really that emotional shift, the bottom of the funnel. So the character or the audience gains insight. So in the play that I talked about, Detecting Obstacles, the mom is able to gain a little bit of insight into her grief. And at the end of the play, she does leave the Roomba behind. She turns it off and she goes with her kids to the first grief group. And content, if you look at it, it's the case studies we do, or the demos, or the free trials where the belief meets the decision. So I know this is a really overused phrase, but I think it's important, where good content doesn't just inform, it transforms. And it's you would say that post funnel stage is the advocacy. So the audience leaves the theater and talks about the play to other people, shares it with their, in our case, in the educational software vertical, the audience might be a director of admissions that goes back and talks to their whole board and says, we need to get this solution. If it's a vitamin company, the customer might say, this is the right, vitamin for me. And it's really where you're getting that shares, reviews, and referrals. So the conversation lives on, and just like good theater, it's something, or a good movie, you're living on after the movie's over and you've gotten up and walked out of the event.
I love that. And what's really cool with all of that analogy, it has this flow to it. You have to start with the hook. Like, obviously, if you
Yeah,
watch this play and you went straight for the resolution and then you went back to the hook and then this and that, it doesn't quite make sense. And
exactly.
obviously, the buyer's journey follows different pathways. But I love that you've kind of outlined that, someone needs to be hooked. You have to build trust. They have to know and feel heard. And then you've got to kind of do the bottom of the funnel, that your solution is the right thing enough that it drives that advocacy standpoint. So I love the flow. Even if they kind of take different pathways to get there, it's kind of important that they follow those steps, which is really important. How do you manage that in your day-to-day job to kind of help people follow the flow when there is, like, it's the internet and it's AI and we can kind of go everywhere? Like, how do you try to manage that process?
Well, I mean, I think I'd love that you brought up AI too, because I think everybody that's in marketing should know how to use AI. And I think writers should know how to use it. I think it's a great skill set to have. And I think it has its place. But I also think at the bottom of that, when you're talking about how you're creating demos, or you're creating an ebook, or you're creating case studies, those also have to have that story as the central anchor. And that's your hook is, I know what you're going through. I think the audience, even the audience that is outside of us, is when they're doing their Google searches, they're looking for someone who can reflect, they know the journey or the challenge. We're content marketers are kind of the backpack that you want your audience members to feel they can put on to help them get up over that next mountain. And so even in search and all of those things, what's still going to resonate is this back and forth exchange of, are you there to sell me or are you there to help me? Are you there to, just get my dollars in the door and then are you going to leave me? Or are you there to really be a trusted partner? And I think the joy and the fun of content marketing, because I think it's a really fun thing, is keeping that through line conversation going well after you've made a sale, because we return to the things that make us feel seen. And that's just in every day of our lives. We return to the places where we feel safe and seen and understood. Content can help you do that. And I think that's where the skill set of a good content writer is, yes, to employ AI and take what it can give you, but also know that there's a central human voice. It's the same voice that we want to have a cup of coffee with if we were meeting in person. It's that long-term trust. And it makes the audience return. When you write one good play, the audience is willing to come back and see another play, in the same way as if you've created a really, really good product, the audience is already hyped to come back and see the next thing you're doing. There's a reason that, we all still talk about that great Apple announcement that Apple did years ago with Steve, is it Jobs or Jobs? With him, because we remember the feeling that we were feeling as being a part of his announcement. We were excited. I was at, when I was a technology journalist, I used to go to the big festivals in New York at Javits Center. And I remember when Jeff Bezos came and he showed the Kindle, and it was just like, what? This is incredible. And I still remember him being on stage as if he were an actor and talking about how the Kindle was going to change everyone's lives. So I think good content can do that in any vertical.
I love that. Okay, so there's so many good things there. I have like a million different directions I want to go, but I want to ask you just a couple questions in the few minutes that we have left.
Yeah.
For this 10-minute play and all of the other plays that you've written, because this isn't the only one,
Mhm.
where do you get your inspiration for writing the story? I'm curious.
Usually, I'm a proponent of quiet. And so, I'll have a whole day in my day job that's just for writing. It's completely blocked out for writing. That doesn't mean I'm writing the whole time. It means I'm thinking, I'm scrolling down ideas. And most of my ideas for plays come when I'm driving my car and listening to music. I don't know why, but they'll come there. And so that play, Detecting Obstacles, and another one that was produced called The Groovy Ride, which is another 10-minute play, it really, both of those came while I was driving my car. And what's interesting is it just needs to be a space where you can kind of use that yes and comedy improv component, which people use in business, to where any idea that comes through, you're not throwing out. You're just really thinking of how that might work. When I create content, what I'm thinking of is, what is the long tail narrative that I'm telling? What do I want folks at the end to feel that I can establish at the very first, at that very hook? Detecting obstacles is about grief and how sometimes grief makes us so crazy. And I don't mean crazy in a bad way, just, it takes up our whole life, that we look for magical things that our loved one is still there, like, being reincarnated in the Roomba. But with content, I think that the same holds true. We're looking for that glimmer, something that makes us feel like we can go back to our leadership and say, this is the product that we need to go with, and here's why, and be able to summarize that in three, short lines. This is why we need to do it. So those aha moments in content, I think, are, they come from thinking about things more than speaking to things. I think active listening and thinking is more important than, being the loudest and funniest person in the room.
I love that. So the reason I ask is I feel like every creative person who is talented at writing stories and building actual connection, like clearly,
Yeah.
I love the outline of this play. I can tell that you're a master storyteller in everything that you do. I love that you give yourself the space to be creative, right? It's the
Yeah.
moments in the car with the music. Like you said, it's the day away from meetings,
Yes.
not necessarily sitting at my desk. I know there's entire softwares where the writing tool is just, it turns off all other notifications. You can't see anything else, so you're focused.
Yeah, I think that's
I
really
don't
important.
think I don't think anyone who is a good creative writer that tells a story that people actually connect with has ever done it sitting at their desk, staring at a computer screen during their 9 to 5. I think the
100%.
stories come in the moments outside of those where your brain has time to relax. Do you agree with that from what you've seen and everything that you experience?
100%. And I'll tell you something else, a lot of the essays that I write, because I write a lot of essays, some published, some not, but a lot of times if I'm stuck on an idea, I'll also go and hand wash my dishes. So one of the things my husband and I laugh about is that we have a dishwasher, but I don't always want the dishes in the dishwasher. I want there to be a time where I can hand wash dishes, because it's something about that physical piece of it. And then thinking as you're doing something daily that you might think of as mundane, it's not at all. It actually kind of tells your brain we're in a quiet moment. It's not hectic. Hey, what do you have in mind about this? And so 100% I agree. And I'm lucky too, because I work for a leader that is fine with Tuesdays being completely blocked out and me quiet and knowing that I'm thinking of stuff. And the person that I supervise, I do the same, I tell them, please have one day at least a week where it's a set day and everyone knows that's your writing thinking day.
I love that. And I think it goes beyond just content. I think it goes to any role. If you're coming up with any kind of a creative solution, I don't care what department you're in, creativity and understanding, letting your brain relax allows it to solve problems in unique ways. And I think that's such a cool concept. Eddie, this has been amazing. We have run out of time, but I have got the wheels turning. I love
Awesome.
this 10-minute play concept. I love everything you're talking about when it comes to story writing and the ability to connect with an audience. I think it's amazing. If anyone
Thank
wants to
you.
connect with you and reach out online, how and where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Nettie Reynolds on LinkedIn. And then I also have a website that's nettiereynolds.net, but I'm kind of bad at keeping it up. So they can connect with me on LinkedIn. And Benjamin, you'll have to tell us your favorite way to come up with creative ideas, because it's obvious that you're incredibly creative just in coming up with this podcast and the interviews that you do.
So for me, the big one is, and I told my teams this throughout my career, you have to stare out the window. So that's kind of how I do
I
it.
love it.
I have to be in a room with a window. I live in northern Utah. I'm up by the mountains.
Oh,
Staring out the window and kind of letting your mind wander is a must have. That's kind of, and I think it's different for everyone. I mean, there's entire Reddit channels towards shower thoughts where people have a moment to let their brain relax. I think people can experience that in nature or
yeah.
in art or in whatever they're doing. I think it's a self-discovery opportunity to figure
I
out where
love
you
that.
receive inspiration. And I think people have to kind of figure it out for themselves too.
I love it. Well, thank
I
you
love
so
it.
much. It was an honor to be a part of this podcast, truly.
Yeah, Nettie, this has been great. For all of our listeners listening in, I will link directly to Nettie's LinkedIn profile in the show notes below, so you can just click there and connect with her. Nettie, again, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.